Hello, YouTube. My name is Alan, and it's that time once again. Let's talk metal. The Christmas tree is gone from the background. Yeah, we've kind of wrapped up 2023 and moved into 2024. But I've got one last little piece of business with 2023 and thought I'd do one last collection update as sort of the very final pickups for my collection from 2023. Did not really pick up a lot at the end of the year, especially by the time I got to Thanksgiving. It's like I've picked up a lot of stuff over the past month or two. I was kind of happy not to buy a whole lot of stuff there during the holiday season, but I did find a couple of handfuls of things. One thing I've noticed and I've commented on in past years, during the holidays, you often see a lot of stuff show up in used record stores because there's always somebody who needs some extra cash for Christmas presents and stuff. And so they'll take, a chunk of CDs or records in to trade them in, cash them out. So it's always a good time to keep an eye on the used bins. So a few days before Christmas, I had some last minute errands to do. Did check in at the local record stores and yeah, ended up, buying about, let's see, I think about 9 or 10 CDs and one LP here. So we'll take a quick look at what I picked up at the very tail end of 2023. Some of these I've already played quite a bit. Some of them I haven't really had a chance to touch yet. We'll start with the non-metal component here. There's real metal coming, I promise. But yeah, one of the used bookstores had a couple of Bruce Springsteen CDs I had just never picked up. One of them is his debut, Greetings from Asbury Park, New Jersey. In recent years, I've developed, a fondness for the early Springsteen material. Yeah, for a long time, the early stuff didn't appeal to me very much, but it's clicked in more recent years. This one I've played a couple of times. At this stage, Springsteen, was definitely kind of, emulating Bob Dylan a little bit. Dylan, I never could get into a lot. His voice is very hard to get accustomed to. I'm not really into folky kind of music very much. Yeah, Springsteen's voice is better and doesn't lean in the folk direction nearly as strongly. But he does the same thing on this album. He's trying to cram a lot of words into every single song. It works okay. Some songs are better than others. I had never heard particularly good things about this. Yeah, I picked it up simply because A, I'd never heard it, and B, this was $2. So at $2 CDs, it's a little hard to argue with. But I am happy to say it actually doesn't sound that bad. And there's a couple of pretty cool tracks on it on first listen. The other one I got later on from him, Lucky Town. This came out 91 or 92. He released two albums on the same day, which looking back is a really weird thing to do, but bands were doing it there for a little bit in the early 90s, like the whole Guns N' Roses, Use Your Illusion, yeah, hoopla. The other album that came out with this, Human Touch, is one that is kind of universally panned as being a little too happy or dippy, especially for Springsteen, whose, bread and butter was more the blue collar, working class, woe is me kind of music. This one, though, is a little closer to his idiom. It's still not really regarded as one of his better albums, but again, it was $3. I'd never heard it. I'd heard a couple of songs, of course. There were a couple of minor hits that came off of it that did okay on the radio at the time. So I was like, yeah, for $3, I'll pick it up. And most of the tracks on here are actually pretty decent. Not his strongest album, but I'd say there's 10 tracks. I'd say 7 or 8 of these are perfectly listenable if you're a Springsteen fan. So yeah, quite okay. Would I have paid $8 a piece for those? No, I would not have. Would I have paid $5 a piece for those? Probably not. $5 for both of them? Sure, that's when you take a chance. And I'd say the chance worked out well. Okay, okay. If you stick with me, yes, let's earn those true metal street cred points back and show some actual heavy metal now. The LP that I picked up, this was in a used bin, is this one. It's by an Italian band called Vultures Vengeance. The album is titled The Night Lore. Night as in Knight. This was something that somebody had recommended to me in the comments on a video or in a live chat, or kind of late in 2023. And apologies that I don't remember who it is. I was doing better at keeping up with who recommended what for a while. And yeah, then I got way behind on keeping track of that. But yeah, someone had mentioned that they thought, I would like this album, and I'd played a couple of tracks of it on YouTube when they recommended it. So I was like, yeah, okay, that sounds kind of interesting. And I remembered that one of the local stores had had it used. This has been sitting in their used bin for a while. It was still there. It, I want to say it was like 18 bucks or something. It was not particularly expensive. So I was like, yeah, okay, based on the recommendation and the fact that I liked the clips I heard, I'll pick it up. And it is pretty good. I've played it a handful of times. It's traditional metal. You could put it into the new wave of traditional heavy metal category. It does, however, have a little bit of the Italian power metal flair. Now, it's not a power metal album. I think it's very much in the traditional bin. What I mean by that statement, though, is that with the guitar work, is pretty bright, a little flamboyant, and the lyrics and vocals. Italian power metal bands just have a slightly different take on the genre compared to bands from other countries in Europe. Eh, they just have like a very it's a little hard to describe, slightly quirky vibe. The lyrics maybe lean a little bit more esoteric. Part of that may just be things getting lost in translation from Italian to English. But yeah, it definitely, hearing this, I'm not the least bit surprised it's an Italian band. And all this, I mean, in a good way. It helps differentiate them from bands in other territories. So, decent album. On first impression, the songs are a little bit samey over the course of the album. So, not a lot of tracks stand out individually, but it's a decent sounding record. For 18 bucks, didn't mind picking it up. All right, then let's see what the used metal CD bin had to offer up. We've got Judas Priest, Angel of Retribution, Halford's return with the band. It's a decent Judas Priest album. Not got a lot of, really over the top amazing songs on it, but it's not a bad listen either. There's not many duds. Um, the one misfire is the long epic closer Loch Ness. And this song is, yeah, kind of dreary and not good subject material for Judas Priest in the first place. But the rest of it is it's decent. It did what it needed to establishing the band getting back together with Halford. I had just never picked it up. It was $6. I'm like, yeah, I'll give $6 to have that on the shelf. Would I have given eight? Probably not. We're right there at the line at that point. Next up, we have, let's see, Wormwood, Starvation. This is a bit of a misfire because I thought this was a different band named Wormwood. Got my Wormwoods mixed up. In my defense, I didn't have my phone with me. Family was hanging out in the car. I'd left my phone with my little boy so he could catch Pokemon while I checked out the record bins. So yeah, I was thinking this was one of the other Wormwoods, but it's this particular band. This is a real early catalog number in the 20 buck spin discography. It's spin number 9, I think, if I'm reading this correctly. Um, so yeah, I was like, okay, well, oops, not what I was expecting, but what's this band like? Uh, I've only played this once, did not make a good impression. They're kind of a lot of, synth or kind of organ heavy tones, so it's kind of doing sort of a doomy metal influence. But yeah, it really wasn't doing a whole lot for me on first play. I'll give it another chance, but this one, might end up in the VCLT pile or something. Let's see. After that, we had this one, Ludicrous The Tenant. I've been reading the US black metal book recently. That'll be showing up in a video itself pretty soon. And this was one of the albums that, the author had, talked about it, it's kind of being, the band's best album, being, sort of a notable album in US black metal history. So I was like, okay, I'm not really familiar with the band. So this was a blind buy. First impressions, like, not sure about this. I'm gonna have to give it a few more spins. It very much has that more kind of quote unquote urban black metal sound that, some US bands in particular have gravitated toward. There's nothing, cold or Cascadian or frozen about this. It's, got that sort of, there's a darker vibe to it, but other than the vocals, musically, it didn't strike me as being very, deeply entrenched in black metal. They may have already have drifted. This was the band's last album. They may have already kind of drifted into incorporating a lot more components from other styles. So not really sure yet. We'll give it another chance and see how it does with some repeated listens. All right, since my phone wasn't with me, yep, some blind buys happened. This was one that I had no idea what it was. I could barely read the title. The band name is Retee. It's called Into Endless Night. I bought this solely for the fact that it was on Northern Silence Productions. Northern Silence has released a lot of really good albums in the past year or two. So, like, I'll take a chance on this in the used bin. Turned out this is an Australian sort of post black metal project from Australia. And it's the same individual who has done Woods of Desolation and Forest Mysticum. The artist goes just by the letter D. Most of his stuff, yeah, it's black metal, but it's got a little bit of that kind of, black gaze, shoegaze, post black metal kind of, components to it, which I don't mind from time to time. It's not stuff I listen to constantly, but yeah, it's all right. I tend to think his projects are good, not necessarily amazing, but they get, a one thumbs up. So yeah, this sounds okay. Again, got to play it some more, but at least for a blind buy, it's like okay, that did work out. Next in the used bin was the Lurker of Chalice album. Of course, the sort of Leviathan side project. I had never checked this one out. I really don't even know much about Leviathan. I've only got one of their albums, and I've not played it a whole lot, to be honest. On first impression, this one's pretty good. It does sound maybe like a more atmospheric Leviathan, and that seemed to work for me. And again, that statement may not be very fair since I don't have, a very wide knowledge of Leviathan in the first place. But yeah, I was quite happy to see this pop up in the used bin. Added it to the pile as soon as I saw the cover art. Let's see. Okay, now there was one more non-metal one in the used bin here. This is a band a lot of metalheads seem to gravitate towards, though. There was a used Dead Can Dance CD. This one's called, I don't even remember, Toward the Within. It's a live album. I think it came out around 94. This is a band I've been meaning to go back and check out again. Somebody had dubbed a couple of their albums for me back in the early 2000s. I played them, thought they were kind of okay, but I never really followed up on the band, and all those cassettes are long gone. Yeah, so I always kind of, check the used rock CDs for stuff like this. And yeah, for $4, that's a good time to check them out. The disc is, kind of scuffed up and all, but again, for $4, you take a chance. Um, I've played this once. It's world music. It doesn't really have a lot of gothy sounds or anything. My first impression, like, this is kind of interesting world music. The catch is, I personally am not very interested in world music as a genre. I've got nothing against it, but it's just not for me. So this is something I'll probably put on the shelf, come back to it a much later time. There are times I get in the mood for more non-metal things. That might be the time to revisit it, but at least for now, I can't say I find this very interesting. My understanding is their earlier stuff, like their 80s material, is in a very different vein. So it may just be that I need to hear some of that material rather than this one. All right. We also had this one in the used bin, Morgal Blades. Fell Sorcery Abounds. Great name for a band, Tolkien and themed, so extra points for that. And a pretty cool title for an album as well, in my opinion. I remember hearing this when it came out, and it was kind of interesting, but I didn't like it enough to actually, buy a copy when it was new just a couple years ago. This one I've spun several times. It took a time or two to get the hang of it, because their style's not quite what I was expecting. What you've got here is really a band operating mostly in traditional metal structures, but adding some, very kind of, harsh, raspy vocals that lean towards black metal a bit. But they're not a black metal band. It's very much more like a new wave of traditional heavy metal band, that happens to be using some extreme metal vocals at times. But they don't use it for all songs. Some of the songs have a little, much cleaner singing style. After a handful of listens, I've really enjoyed the album. I like the variety, the fact that they're using some different vocal patterns, that some songs are, yeah, a little gruffer, some songs are a little slower. There's at least one that, is a little more, ballady feeling, but in the good way, not in the, you know, 80s hairspray, hold your lighter up at a concert way. So yeah, this one's worked out pretty cool. Enjoyed the album. Be cool to see if the band follows it up with something maybe in 2024. And the last thing that dug out of the used bin were the two Eternal Champion CDs. This band, of course, has made a bit of a splash in the epic, traditional, new wave of traditional metal circles. They kind of get put under all those headings. I'd of course heard them, especially this one, a few times. It was an album that always struck me as, that seems pretty good, but I think other bands might be doing it better. In particular, things like Atlantean Codex and Visigoth. It just, kind of struck me more immediately. Fer-de-Lance is another band that's like, I think they might actually be stronger at this. But for, yeah, these were $8 a piece. Like, I will pick them up used for that. And, playing them repeatedly, this one in particular, I've kind of gotten the hang of the band now. I'm like, okay, I understand more of what they're trying to do. Unlike some epic bands, they're not really hammering on the doomy side very much. The production and stuff is a little different. Several of these guys also work, in the Sumerlands project, and it makes sense. Sonically, you can kind of hear that connection. It's just that, yeah, in this case, they're going for, yeah, more of that epic flair. Some of these songs, they're touching all the normal things. They're checking off the box. You've got your Moorcock, you've got your Howard, you've got your Lovecraft. They've even written a few songs in their own little fantasy world. They've even got their own little fantasy map in here. Yes, hey, this is our own fantasy thing that everyone who was a nerd in high school, made up their own map with their own funny country names on it. Yeah, and that may have been something that kind of, was a little bit of a turnoff for me at first was, it seemed like this was just going through the checklist and making sure they did everything. But having played it, more and more, so they do actually have a pretty unique sound. It's pretty cool. I like the vocal phrasing. It's a little unique. Has this kind of halting. Sometimes they repeat certain words in lines for extra emphasis. Like, I am not pause, not to be crossed. Which actually works pretty well. One thing with epic metal is, the vocals often require a little bit of a different approach. You need some kind of little vocal quirk to help with the storytelling. And Eternal Champion seems to do that pretty well. So glad I picked these up. I've come around on the band. They do quite well on this one. Haven't gotten to play this one more than once, but initial impression is that it's kind of a good follow-up to that. And that is it. There are a couple of things ordered technically at the end of 2023 that haven't arrived yet. So those we'll talk about sometime in 2024. But that's going to do it for today's list. So now let's talk metal in the comments down below. Have you also noticed this pattern where the local stores end up with some really good used stuff right before the holidays? Does it only happen in my area? Or do you have the same pattern of folks selling off some cool records to get the little holiday cash? And as such, do you swoop in and pick that stuff up? Have you ever found anything especially cool in kind of your holiday used bin dives? If so, leave a comment down below. It's always fun to read what other folks have discovered and other viewers like, reading those stories too. All right, that'll do it for now. So until next time, everybody take care. And as always, keep banging your head.